Welcome back. Welcome back. Your man Diamond K in here, of course, on firetelevision.com, the diamondkshow.com. The Texas primary is upon us, and it marks the first midterm primary election in the United States for 2022. Now, even without a election, presidential election, that is, it is still an important midterm election year. Now, all 435 seats in the U.S. House of Representatives and a third of the Senate seats are up for grabs. Texas is one of 39 states with gubernatorial elections this year, as well as other state offices on the ballot. Now, Bexar County in Texas will elect a new county judge, and that is the top elected official in the county for the first time in 20 years. The positions will ultimately be decided during the general election in November 8th to be exact, but the candidates who make it to November's election will be selected by the voters in today's primary election. Now, when we talk a little bit about primary elections, folks may, have questions. Primary election, general election, what's really going on? Now, in Texas, primary elections are actually two separate elections, one for Republicans and one for Democrats. They occur on the same day, March the 1st, today, and Republican and Democratic parties use statewide primary elections to select their respective nominees for the general election, which is in November. So the winner of that faces off with the winners of these individual elections in November 8th of this year. Winners are determined by a majority vote. If no single candidate receives more than 50% of the votes during the primary, the top two candidates will head off in a runoff election in May. The winner would then advance to November's general election. So that's something that happens often. It happens often, and folks may be confused about that. So what is important to understand is that the winner is determined by the majority vote. Winner is determined by the majority vote. So you have these runoff elections when nobody receives more than 50%. So if they're not the majority candidate, then they got to go at it again. So Texas recognizes four political parties: the Democratic Party, the Green Party, the Libertarian Party, and the Republican Party. The Green and Libertarian parties nominate candidates by convention, and their candidates will not appear on the primary election ballot. You can find out how to participate in the conventions by visiting the Green Party and Libertarian Party's websites. We're going to have this Texas primary ballot. It's going to include federal, state, and county races. We're going to be talking about that tonight here at On Fire Television and the DiamondKShow.com. Of course, the State of the Union going on. We're going to talk about that as well. All tonight, starting at 8 p.m. Now, I want to talk a little bit about some things to watch in tonight's Texas primary. The midterms, as I said, kick off with tonight's elections. And this is the country's first primary. So is this going to set the tone for what we see later on in the year? Time will tell. Just take a quick break, come back, and talk about some things to watch for tonight. Welcome back to the Diamond K Show. This is the 2022 Texas primary election voter guide on firetelevision.com, the DiamondKShow.com. Now, two big name Republicans, Governor Greg Abbott and Attorney General Ken Paxton, will seek to beat back challenges from the right. In South Texas, the most conservative Democrat in the U.S. House, Representative Henry Seller, is attempting to survive a rematch. The progressive that he is facing nearly ousted him in the primary 2 years ago, so they're going to have that rematch. The contest will be the first test on how the restrictive new voting law enacted by Texas Republicans last year will reshape the electorate. One more wrinkle in Texas: to win a primary, candidates don't just have to beat their rivals, but they have to get more than 50% of the vote. Otherwise, this goes again May the 24th in a runoff. Now, that threshold could play an important role in several House primaries. I am expecting several runoffs. Now, this is going to be the first test of the restrictive voting law. Texas is among a slew of Republican-dominated states that enacted a new law that makes voting by mail more difficult and outlaws some options. What are these options? Drive-through and 24-hour early voting that a large state like Texas counties used in 2020. Of course, that was the pandemic, start of the pandemic at least. Folks, here's what's interesting about that. When Republicans benefited from early voting, when Republicans benefited from drive-through voting, they liked it. But when they lose, then they don't like it. Today's primary will be the first election to take place under this new restrictive law. We're going to see how this works out. Now, operatives and activists across the country will be watching closely to see how the law affects primary turnout. Is it going to affect who tries to vote? Is it going to affect that? I don't know. Tonight is going to tell the story. Now, other states with new voting laws include Arizona, Florida, Georgia. They have implemented different restrictions. Many are similar to what Texas is doing. But Texas, you got to tune in. And it's going to be the first run at what could offer a preview of what's to come in those state primaries as well. Another thing that we need to look out for is, can progressives change the narrative in South Texas? Can that happen? We're gonna see that. Progressive heavyweights like Bernie Sanders of Vermont and Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez of New York have made their endorsement. But recent ads and allies focused on the potential legal issues of the progressive candidate in South Texas. So watching that race. Big GOP race might not be settled on Tuesday. That is the one involving Ken Paxton, the two-term incumbent, could be forced into a GOP primary runoff. I don't predict that he's going to win the clear majority tonight, talking about Ken Paxton. We're going to watch that race. And with recent polling showing him falling short of that threshold, the big question in this very expensive race is which of the three challengers is most likely to advance to the potential one-on-one contest in November. Paxton is Trump's candidate, the Trump-endorsed candidate, let me say that. And he is running under a cloud of ethics concerns, of course. Who else is Trump going to align himself with but somebody who is under a cloud of ethics concerns? So this includes an unresolved 2015 indictment for securities fraud and more recent allegations lodged by a group of his own, now former, top aides that he abused his office. This is the guy, of course, that Trump is going to align with. Paxton has denied any wrongdoing, but his primary opponents have sought to use his existing legal troubles and the possibility of more to come to undermine his bid for a third term. If he does not win the nomination outright, Paxton will face either Land Commissioner George P. Bush, former state Supreme Court Justice Eva Guzman, or Louis Gohmert. All three are well-funded with strong political brands across the state. That's a definite race that I am interested to see the outcome of. Now, the heavyweight governor's race is being teed up. Republican Governor Greg Abbott is seeking a third term. And though he faces primary challengers, including Don Huffins, the former state senator, and Alan West, the former Florida congressman and former chairman of the Texas Republican Party, he is the heavy favorite to secure the GOP nomination. Abbott is on a collision course with Beto O'Rourke, the former Texas congressman whose near miss in the 2018 Senate race rocketed him to a national stardom, but he failed in that 2020 presidential primary run, as many remember. The Texas is a Republican-leaning state, and historical factors suggest that 2022 will be a favorable year for the Republicans. We're going to see. Now, Beto O'Rourke, although says that Abbott's management is to blame for the widespread power outages during the 2021 winter storm in Texas and for the GOP's focus in the state on cultural issues, including the passing of the law that effectively outlawed abortions after about 6 weeks of pregnancy. So there are some House races to watch. And Texas lawmakers redrew the state's congressional districts last year. They effectively turned swing districts into a thing of the past. Battlegrounds turned into safe seats, and some Republicans and Democrats benefited from that. So that has made the primaries the most intense competition for seats in the U.S. House. So we have some Republicans that are facing challengers. Now, they're arguing that they are insufficiently conservative. You're not conservative enough, and you don't support Donald Trump enough. That's some of the arguments that these politicians are having. In the 8th district, where GOP Representative Kevin Brady is retiring, establishment favorite Morgan Luttrell, a former Navy SEAL backed by Kevin McCarthy and the Congressional Leadership Fund Super PAC, faces a very far-right opponent in Kristen Collins, who is supported by Marjorie Taylor Greene. So you already know the mindset there. In 2 open seat races that favor Democrats, 2 leading contenders, former Austin City Congressman Greg Casar in the 35th district, who has been endorsed by Sanders and AOC. Another person that we need to look out for in the state, Representative Jasmine Crockett in the 30th district, are all but certain to lead the pack. But the key question is whether they will cross the 50% threshold to avoid the runoff. Nobody wants to do the runoff, right? Because, you really want to focus on November. So they're hoping to get that 50% of the vote. We're going to be, as I said, talking about that tonight, starting at 8 p.m. Eastern, 7 p.m. Central. State of the Union, we're also going to be talking about this Texas primary. It is a very interesting time. We also are watching what is happening in Ukraine. A lot of things going on. Of course, at the Diamond K Show, on firetelevision.com. We are here thediamondkshow.com. I'll see you guys later on tonight, starting at 8 p.m.